Hello and welcome back to The Right Hype. I'm your host, Gavon, and this is your May 2026 dispatch. Today, we're going to be talking about three things. The first one is Shein buying Everlane, which is crazy. Number two is Zara has been creating some waves lately, and I think it's trying to change from being a fast fashion brand into a legitimate fashion house. And then the last thing I want to talk about is something that I'm building that is coming to New York this summer, and I want you all to be a part of it. So let's get into it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, so first up, I want to talk about Shein buys Everlane. So when I first heard about this taking place, it was actually really crazy. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was a joke or someone was playing a joke online, essentially. But Puck, which is a very reputable sort of media outlet, actually broke the news that Shein was buying Everlane for $100 million, which I believe Shein, based off of this BOF article that I was reading, where it really goes into detail about the acquisition, it said that at the time when Everlane was invested in by a private equity giant, Al Caterton, at the time it was evaluated at 600 million. So this was a very big devaluation for Everlane. And one of the things that I immediately thought about is this has to be a PR stunt. Shein has to be buying Everlane because it wants to sort of fix its long-standing issues with consumers, being a fast fashion company that is terrible for the planet and produces clothes that leach harmful chemicals and microplastics onto our bodies, into our water systems. It's bad. So what does Shein want with Everlane, a brand that is struggling to generate revenue? I have a couple of theories. One of them is I think Shein is definitely looking to utilize like Everlane's supply chain philosophy. I'm not sure. I think Everlane has literally came on the scene to be radically transparent. And so Shein might be actually buying Everlane because it has the one cultural equity, a unique aspect that Shein desperately needs in order to win over a lot of consumers who they've alienated. And there's a huge shift happening right now where the economy is down and people are still shopping, but they're shopping from a lot more value led, not values driven, but more like getting more bang for their buck. They're buying based off a price. They're looking for deals. They're looking for more for less, whether it is shopping fast fashion or shopping secondhand. Consumers today are just not buying into luxury as much. That isn't to say that people are not shopping luxury at all, but it's just really decreased just due to the economy and just the shifting perception of the fashion industry. So the other thing I wanted to bring up with Everlane specifically is that if the prices don't come down, then Shein really doesn't get anything in return because the brand is already struggling today. The brand doesn't really speak to the cultural zeitgeist, what's happening, what people are talking about. It's really sat still while everyone has like basically evolved. And I want to actually read an excerpt from this BOF article titled Shein's Everlane Acquisition Explained, and it was written by Kathleen Chen on May 22nd, 2026. And so she sort of details how when Everlane was first stepping into the scene, the brand was really good at talking directly to millennials with a communication strategy that felt personal, it felt conversational. Instead of pushing massive seasonal collections, Everlane really highlighted singular items and really talked about this idea of like transforming basic essentials into these high demand products. And at the time, it was really attractive, but the market has shifted and there was a flood of new startups like Keats who also began co-opting the language of transparency and the exact same minimalist aesthetic that Everlane had. So the brand sort of found itself in between global giants like Uniqlo as well as a resurgence of legacy American retailers like Gap and J. Crew, who had successfully modernized their playbooks to reclaim the elevated basics category. So the playing field grew, and Everlane just sort of got lost in the shuffle. So it's unfortunate to see a brand like Everlane fall out of favor with millennials and really not being able to capture Gen Z's hearts and minds as well. But that could all change. You know, Shein has loads and loads of money. That will definitely help with getting rid of some of the debt that Everlane has accumulated, as well as give the team a way to potentially return this brand to good standing and culture. But at the end of the day, you know, Everlane and Shein kind of operate as these like fashion companies, but they're really like tech. There's a lot of technology that goes into Shein, Everlane as well, in order to report on supply chain metrics and like having that transparency. You need technology to do that. And so I think technology being this through line between these two brands is really going to set Shein up for further domination. And if Everlane can leverage the technology in a way that brings more clarity and to the consumer and builds trust, then I do see a future in which Everlane could come back, because being bought by Shein may be a negative headline at first, but it's a headline. And right now, Everlane really needs to be talked about because they're not talked about at all. So maybe it'll survive the trade-off, maybe it won't. I think what Shein also has to gain, and I don't know how this would work, but Everlane has a lot of retail footprints. And so could this be a way that Shein can expand into these new markets with a little bit more credibility, with physical retail access that they couldn't before, right? Like if you had a Shein store next to Everlane, it would be less weird that now than if it was just a Shein store. I think people would be quite concerned, but I also think people would still shop it because I just think people are looking for cheap items. They're looking for things that they can grab and go quickly. They're just not interested in these curated experiences that cost a lot of money anymore, because at the end of the day, they want the products to work. So a lot of I do think there's a lot of confusion around like the types of consumers that these two brands serve. And it goes without saying that Shein and Everlane serve very, very different consumers. So I have a fear that this issue between the consumer and the brand, the trust issue between the consumer and brand, is going to be exacerbated now. But for right now, that's just like par for the course, because the fashion industry is in complete disarray. People are not splurging on luxury items like they once were. People are starting to second guess if they even need clothing that is new and are going down the secondhand route. So it's a pretty interesting time to like be talking about this, because sustainability has fallen out of the conversation over the last 5 years. There are a lot of other issues that are consuming people's minds now, whereas sustainability in like 5, 6 years ago, especially during COVID, that's like all anyone could really talk about. So this one is a really interesting one. I'm curious if anyone else had like really saw this headline and, you know, give it a second thought. There's a really cool article that I recommend reading from the Business of Fashion that really dives into it. And Kathleen Chen, she wrote a couple of other articles around how like Shein buying Everlane feels like the death of a dream that we once had, which was really about like responsible, equitable, sustainable clothing like that we bought in industry could one day be better. But Shein buying Everlane, Everlane being one of the champions of that message, now living under the umbrella of a fast fashion brand, just feels like hardcore dissonance. And if I'm feeling it, I know other people are feeling it too. So it's going to be an interesting time. I want to continue to pull on this thread around sustainability and fashion, because right now we're witnessing that the giants of fashion. So it's interesting. It's like the biggest players who are the biggest contributors to the issue actually have the potential to resolve the issue at scale in collaboration with a bunch of organizations. So that's pretty interesting. And I think I want to move on to the next topic, and that is about Zara, because Zara is another fashion brand who has been trying to change its stripes. I remember when Zara announced a collaboration with Ludovic de Saint Seren, um, and has been like really killing it when it comes to sort of the like male female and androgynous sort of like edgy style, super like sleek, and also just like it's just like so interesting to see someone like Ludovic take different pieces of inspiration from other brands and other fashion houses that are either here today or have gone and just and bring that to Gen Z in a fresh way. So when I saw that Zara was working with Ludovic, I thought that was like a signal that Zara is not trying to appeal to the everyday sort of consumer in the way that like a Uniqlo will work with, I don't know, like they'll work with like Cartoon Network intellectual property or like anime intellectual property, which feels a lot more mass market than a Ludovic de Saint Seren. So that was one of my first thoughts of like, okay, Zara's going niche. And then I also saw Zara partner with Willie Chavarria on a collection, which I would have never guessed, but there's also this connection that they have to Spain and Spanish culture. And then Bad Bunny for the Super Bowl this year in 2026, he had an all white fit designed by Zara. Not only did he wear Zara to the Super Bowl, but he also wore Zara to the Met Gala. And then to our surprise this past week, he dropped a collaboration with Zara. So Bad Bunny and Zara are going in very hard. There's one other thing that happened that really caught my eye in March. They announced that John Galliano would be a creative partner and reauthor Zara's archives, which was kind of crazy because Zara is a fast fashion brand. It doesn't have archives. And when you think about reauthoring Zara's archives, a lot of people think about like fast fashion waste. So like, is this a sustainability play or is there going to be a lot of brand storytelling that shows like the initial Zara sketches that we never saw that no one really knows about, but like John Galliano is going to be this like conduit that tell Zara's story. I don't know. There was a lot more questions than answers, and people in the comments section on Instagram were basically asking the same similar questions that I was having. But Zara has yet to really answer these questions, and we won't really know what this John Galliano collection will look like until September. So a lot of us are just watching. And one thing that I've been thinking about specifically when it comes to Zara is like, when I think of the Zara consumer, because I'm very consumer centric as a strategist, I'm always thinking like, who is this brand for? And when I think about Zara, I think about like people who push trends, like people who aren't necessarily behind trends at all. They like know trends are there and they will dabble and pick and choose the ones that they want, but they will definitely be the first person to sort of like push it, really promote that they're wearing this new trend or this new item, this new designer, this new style, this new silhouette. Like those people are what Zara loves because Zara provides the newness that they crave. And they can turn that product into their identity because it's new and no one else will necessarily have it as quickly as they will because their whole sole purpose is to like push new trends. But then you have this other consumer that sits on a same spectrum as this trend pusher, but like they're more about taste. And it's really what separates these two is the intention. The intention of a taste arbiter, someone who is basically like writing a story through style is going to say no to a lot of things, but will say yes to the right things. And I think having that discernment is what delineates a trend pusher versus a taste arbiter. And right now, Zara has spoken to the trend pusher for decades, but who they're trying to speak to is possibly this taste arbiter because this is my theory and this is where I think like Zara is kind of missing the mark is that if you're constantly going for the trend pusher, you won't be taken seriously as a fashion house because fashion is really built on prestige, knowledge, and taste. So you need those taste arbiters, the people who set the barometer of what's cool for the taste pusher to really to truly evolve from a fast fashion brand into a legitimate fashion house. And a campaign won't solve that. A collaboration collection will not solve that. But ironically, what could solve that is by having these truly organic style moments where someone whose style is heavily followed and sought after wears Zara organically. And not like the basic Zara that's like indistinguishable that you could essentially buy from H&M, but like maybe from one of these collections that they're dropping with Bad Bunny or Willie Chavarria. Like seeing a taste arbiter wear the clothes in the wild, not paid to promote, sends a different signal than Bad Bunny wearing Zara to the Super Bowl. Because we all know that to get access to the Super Bowl, you just have to pay. But to be worn organically, you have to be trusted. You have to be beloved and cherished and respected. And I think Zara being in the same lane as like a fast fashion brand, it's very hard for people to take it seriously. So I think it'll be so interesting to see what happens in September. But like right now, for me, I think if Zara truly wants to turn things around, it has to appeal to the right consumer, but also it has to change its retail experience. I feel like retail is the truly like last frontier of luxury that cannot be replicated. You can replicate product, you can even replicate quality, but truly replicating an amazing retail experience is really hard to come by, especially at a Zara store, because they're typically crowded. There's a lot of people, but there's also like a lot of products on the racks. And like, if you look at a rack with a loads loaded up with product versus a rack with, one item from each SKU, it really just sends a totally different message. One feels curated and intentional, the other feels product driven and very much focused on like leading your own adventure. Versus if it's curated, you do have to rely on the store associates to deliver that customer service. And honestly, just elevates the experience that much better when you have someone helping you, especially if you're a serious shopper. There are some people who are browsing, but then there are people who are like serious shoppers. And having a store clerk just help you navigate the store, get the right sizes, let you know what other products that they don't have in store that you may like that's top tier. And I think if Zara really wants to capture this crowd that they're going for, this fashion forward crowd, and not just produce clothing that is inspired by their culture, I think then Zara has a good thing on their hands. But until then, it's really unsure if the AI checkout is gonna be it because I don't think convenience is it. Also, the lines are crazy. So Zara fixed the in-store experience, and that would really be a differentiator in the fast fashion and luxury space. All right, so that's enough industry talk. I want to talk about something that I'm building personally. There's too much evidence. Like I've seen too much in my time working in agencies and marketing and fashion and like the New York creative scene where like there are just so many people who are dying to be in the right rooms. There's so many people who come to Fashion Week just to go to a show, to sit front row or go to the after parties. There's so many people who sign up for these conferences like Culture Con and like are just dying to get a job offer from a brand booth or meet a mentor. Like there's so many people out here looking for spaces for them, but frankly, it's hard to find. So I've decided that I want to take a stab at building the right rooms. That's the title, but it's also the ethos because the right rooms are made for you and they're made by you as well. So it's really going to be a community first event series where people who are doing the work and are excited about the work that they're doing and want to talk to other people about the work that they're doing and they want to feel seen in the work that they're doing, then this is really a space for you because there are so many of us who are sharp thinkers, who are incredibly talented, but feel so invisible at work. And it's not because the work isn't good. It's because visibility just isn't automatic when you walk into your place of work. So this room that I'm building is really designed to supercharge your visibility around people whose opinions, thoughts, and what they're building also matters as well. This is not just for strategists. This is really for anyone, strategic minds, creative minds, builders, producers, thinkers, thought leaders. So I'm really excited because I've met so many people along my journey here in New York. It's incredible the people and the access that I've had, but it's also the reason why I started the podcast, The Right Hype, is to give people access to these spaces. It's going to be an IRL series in New York City. I'm thinking happy hours, peer panels, expert meet and greets, as well as live podcast recordings. I want to bring in experts. These are people who own agencies, people who are the head of strategy, they're creative directors. And all of these events will be free to attend. So one thing before I close out, in today's show notes, you will see a Google form and I'll be collecting information so that I can send out a blast when the first event is ready. So that's today's episode. We had three things that we talked about: Shein and Everlane, Zara, and its multiple collaborators and the right rooms. The through line across all of these things is the same thing I keep coming back to, which is trust. You can't buy it, you can't borrow it, you have to build it. If this resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if the right rooms sounds like your kind of room, fill out the form in the show notes.